Brothers and sisters, we've been speaking about this paradox of the spiritual life, that in order to enter the recesses of joy that we cannot even imagine, or the freedom of heart, or to taste God in this most profound way, we must go by way of the cross. And this seems a bit scary, but it's going to come anyway. So we may as well try to embrace it, try to love it. Saint Rose of Lima, great Dominican saint, would say that we climb to heaven on the ladder of the cross. That the grace comes through suffering with Christ, basically, because the resurrection came through his suffering. So there's this kind of law. Now, this, unfortunately, because we spend a lot of times running from the cross, running from suffering, and I made it clear in the last video, we shouldn't go looking for suffering, you know. Yes, our mortifications, our asceticisms, and I'll speak a moment about that. Those are voluntary sufferings. But I mean, I'm talking about the other categories of suffering that you could well imagine that, you know, that one doesn't have to necessarily go looking for. One doesn't try to get cancer, for example, But when these things or involuntary things come our way, they're opportunities to grow in intimacy with Jesus like never before. And that intimacy with Jesus is fruitful. That intimacy with Jesus is where the peace and all the riches of divinity lie for us to receive. And so if we don't really understand how to ask God for the surrender, to embrace the cross, we'll always be fighting the cross. And it'll become, rather than a building block, it'll become a stumbling block to us. And so we must learn how to grow in this. And so basically love has 3 stages, you know, the life of love, the life of holiness. And the first, you could say, prepares us for union. The second consists in the union itself. And then the third contains all the unexplainable, really, consequences that will flow from this union, or prodigious, if that's a word I could use, that explain the fruits of this union in the most incredible way. And so, but each of these stages corresponds to a sorrow. So today we want to look at this sorrow of solitude that purifies the soul. And in this sorrow, you know, Archbishop Martinez says that love, divine love, has a way of inviting us into a solitude. In other words, a separation from everything in the world. And the soul can pass through this sorrow at some point on the journey where it feels a bit alone, even if it might have so many people in their life, gifts, etc. But the Lord is separating the soul so that the soul could really discover the one thing that really will satisfy it, that will give it joy, and that is the Lord. So after the soul passes through these sorrows and this first sorrow, then it will come to see God more clearly already in this life, in the soul through faith. And that joy, brothers and sisters, there are no words for it. So bear with me. I'm going to read from him because his words are much better than mine. So he speaks about, before he's going to speak about this divine love, he looks at even what humans experience in the human. You know, every human love seizes and separates and is akin to death. What do we mean? Well, even human love requires solitude of hearts for its consummation. So this is what it means, like a death. Human love requires like a death to other things. In other words, you cannot have 100 best friends. True love requires time and effort and just a lot of yourself, and that means death to other things that you have to give up for the sake of that love. Like married love requires a death to so many other things. For example, it requires the death that you could have had another spouse, of multiple loves that are possible, and that's why it's as strong as death. Love is as strong as death. And so it requires that sacrifice for it to be true and ennobled. You know, we have to be very intentional about our friendships that we want to invest in. What friends do you have in your life that may be are God's gifts to you, but maybe you're so focused on other things that you cannot maybe pay attention to it. And of course, there's always going to be that phenomenon, and that very difficult thing for all of us. We all experience this. That may be someone who we want to be really close friends with, but they may not want to receive us like that. Or there might be people looking to be close and more intimate with you, but it may not be God's gift for you. And so there's always these tensions in working out human love. But this idea, and that too could be a lonely, a solitary experience. So this is how this idea of sorrow and solitude, how love already calls for a certain solitude away from many other things. And so he's going to look at this on the divine level as well. And we'll have a look at this tomorrow. But it's worth just thinking about how true love passes us through this solitary experience where we're detaching from other things, so to be able to attach on the beloved in a more intense way.